Hello and welcome everyone to another Maine SBDC webinar. My name is Kelsey Reardon and I'm with the state office hosted by USM. And today we have Maine SBDC at AVCOG business advisor Christina Ramsdell to go over the current labor market and tips for retaining your employees. So we've all heard a lot about the changes to the hiring processes and work market and labor market, and all of labor in general has shifted a lot over the last few years. So we're exploring that, but we also have a lot of just like summer jobs that we still need all of our tourism-based businesses throughout Maine. We still need somebody to scoop ice cream and get those canoes in the water. So today we're going to be talking about how to hire the right people and keep the people that you have. So if you are not familiar with the Maine SBDC, we are the Small Business Development Centers, and we provide no-cost confidential business advising. So we can help answer your questions, or we can find somebody who can. We can't provide legal or accounting advice, but we can certainly connect you with some lawyers or some accountants. I'll be sending out follow-up information that will include all of our contact information. So if you're not already set up with a business advisor, there's a big orange button on our website that says request advising, and that's the fastest way to get into our system. We have centers throughout the state and advisors at each center, so we will either connect you with the closest advisor geographically, or maybe you have a specific industry or problem you're facing, and so we can connect you with a business advisor who has experience with that. Christina comes to us from the banking world, so we really appreciate her input on lots of a variety of topics, actually. But it is nice to see what a diverse lived experience our network has, so they can help you out. Otherwise, I think we're all set to get ready, we're all ready to get started. So I will pass it over to Christina.
Thanks, Kelsey. I really appreciate the intro as always. So hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to attend today's webinar. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that everyone has had a conversation with about in some way, shape, or form. It's been in a lot of newspapers. It's obviously been on our TV sets. It is in word of mouth. As you go to see every restaurant, every retail shop, you're probably seeing hiring signs and all of them. And so there's a couple different factors that we're going to talk about that has to do with why you're seeing a lot of statistics and data as to where the state's at specifically. I really tried to keep it specific to Maine versus just the US national data. I'm sure there's some similarities no matter what. But the other part of that is we're going to talk about retaining your current staff, because that's more important than ever. Finding some non-traditional ways to do that. The typical ways are obviously with benefits and some things like that, but we're going to talk about some non-traditional thinking. We're going to get creative on how we might be able to retain our current staff. And then I'm going to talk about some resources and some training tips that you might not be aware of, because the state is obviously aware this is a bigger issue. And I want to be able to connect you with those resources where you can find that the state has a program that might actually work for you. We're going to talk about some demographics like the new Mainer population. We're going to talk about what the difficulties are about potentially hiring those and how we can integrate them more into our cultural society. Talk about students. That's a very popular conversation for labor right now. And we're also going to talk about how to get people who moved here from the state, from different states, on how we might be able to convince them to start working for the state of Maine versus wherever they may have come from and are working remotely. So my name, again, is Christina Ramsdell. I'm a certified business advisor with the Maine Small Business Development Center. I'm actually located at Androscoggin Valley Council of Government, which is in Auburn. I primarily advise clients in the Androscoggin, Franklin, and Oxford counties. And like Kelsey said, my background's in banking. I was actually in retail banking, so I was a branch manager for some years. So I was directly responsible for hiring and training and education and career advancement, retaining employees. So I have some direct experience with this. And I will tell you, even in the banking world, it was difficulty before I left trying to find people, and I left in early 2022. So keep in mind, you're not alone. Every single industry is dealing with this. There's different struggles for each industry. But if you have specific questions, please let me know, and we'll have time for questions at the end of the webinar if there are any. So let's jump on in. So first, I want to start with some just data, just to make sure everyone's kind of aware of the situation and where we're at, and if it was COVID related, if it wasn't COVID related, if this has been an issue that we're dealing with regardless. So both 2020 and 2021 only 60% of Maine adults were in the labor force, which I found really, really interesting. I don't have statistics as to what happened to the other 40%. I don't know if that's because of disability. I don't know if that's because of some other maybe issues in regards to having them enter the workforce. But 60% of Maine residents that are adults, were in the labor force in 2020 and 2021. That was steady. So that did not change from those years. I think you would find that it's pretty consistent with what we will find for 2022 when those reports come out. So here's some graph data that I pulled off of the Maine Department of Labor. So this is a projection of the amount of people we actually need for our workforce. So you'll see that 2020, obviously COVID had a major effect on how many people were actually in the workforce. There were obviously jobs that got consolidated. There were some layoffs. There were some companies that didn't recover. So those are kind of the negative aspects that we're kind of recovering from. 2021, you'll see that we did have an increase in workers from about 675,000 to maybe 683,000, somewhere between there. And by 2030, the Maine Department of Labor is expecting we need about 700,000 workers in order to sustain the current jobs that we have as of right now. Something we need to keep in mind is it's not just attracting people to your specific business, it's really the state. We really need to have more people entering the state. More people who are entering the state means more people who hopefully are going to fill those jobs. But we've got to talk about some ways that we can convince people that this is where they want to grow and that there is opportunity here, right? That's the big thing, is if you're starting a small business or you're in a small business, it's really, really, really hard to hire employees from a W-2 standpoint employee. So we're going to talk about some contract labor and how that might play into something that might help you as far as getting your staffing levels to where you need them to be. So where are all the people? Like, I hear this question every single day. Where are all the people? Or I hear the opposite. The other question is, they just don't want to work, or do they want to work? Or is it the younger generation? I mean, everybody has their own biases as to what has happened to all people. What's actually happening, and I think this is pretty common sense knowledge, there's nothing new here, is that we have an older generation in the state of Maine. We do have one of the oldest populations here in the state of Maine throughout the US. And unfortunately, that does factor into a lot of those jobs. And as they're going into retirement, we don't actually have enough people in the state to take over the jobs that they're retiring from. And these are people that may have been in the industry for 20 years. So not only do you have an older generation retiring, you have all of that knowledge that they have gained over 20 years of experience that are going with them. Changing in the societal norms. So I've talked a lot about this. I also saw this back when I was hiring in banking, is that people are really, really changing to a work-life balance model more than ever. We've talked about it for years and years and years, but I would say, especially with Gen Z and the newer generations coming out, work-life balance is becoming way more important than the 20-year career that they're going to spend at one employer for the rest of their life. Younger generations are leaving the state. So they're either going for college outside of the state, or they're getting an education here and they're leaving to find better paying jobs. Salaries in the state of Maine are obviously a little bit lower than some of the other salaries that you find throughout the US. The other thing that people don't generally think about with that is the cost of living. So is the cost of living higher also where they're going, where that higher salary is? There's not enough of the working age population moving into the state. So people that are moving into the state, especially in the last year or two, have been people from out of state, either because of the pandemic, trying to find a different environment. Maybe they don't want to be in a city anymore. Number of different reasons why people have moved here, but they haven't actually joined the main working population in some cases. Those work from home policies, those had a huge effect, because when you can work from home, it means you can work for almost anybody, right? And not every business has that capability of allowing their employees to work from home. So how do you convince people who could work from home to come in and be in the office, or to work a retail job that maybe they didn't before? So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can set yourself apart. And there definitely are people out there in the workforce who are not work from home people. I am one of them. I can work from home for a very short period of time, but I'm a very social person. I tend to like to be around other people. I tend to like to hear just coworker stories. I like to have some type of team environment. And it's about how do you attract those types of people to come and work something different, or try a different industry, or just come in and learn a little bit more about what your business does. So this is employment growth in Maine. So this is from 2019 to 2021. What I found really interesting about this is that there are some industries that are actually growing, And then there are some industries that were really impacted by 2019 that haven't rebounded yet. So for example, there are thousands of fewer jobs in the leisure, government, social, and healthcare and retail trades compared to the pre-pandemic situation. We are starting to see some of that bounce back, especially with Maine. One of our largest industries is tourism. So we're starting to see obviously a little bit more of that coming back. We do expect there to be more jobs in those areas. But if you can think about those jobs no longer being there and those types of people that were working those jobs, where did they go, right? These are people who have worked in those fields for quite some time. And it's a little bit harder sometimes to translate their skills and their training in a retail or government or social environment, and how that's going to be moved over into maybe a more trained and more skilled industry. While thousands more jobs have actually increased in professional services, construction, manufacturing. Those are three of the major industries that have continued to grow even during the pandemic. But of course, professional services, you're typically looking for some type of basic education, maybe a bachelor's degree, maybe you're looking for specific training, or maybe it's a master's degree. It all depends on what that professional service is. Construction, that's been huge no matter what in the state of Maine. It actually took a little bit of a dip, obviously, in the pandemic era, but you'll see that that's bouncing back. It is going to be interesting to see how construction does with a raising interest rate environment. So more to come about that, because lending will be a little bit harder to get, whether it's a residential build or a commercial build, something that we do have to keep in the back of our mind that does have a direct effect on the construction industry. And manufacturing. So you always need people who are going to manufacture your products and services. The hard part about manufacturing, of course, with a local one that we just thought about is Abbott Laboratories, where there was a recent layoff. They were a big manufacturing plant. And so you have to be kind of mindful about what exactly they are manufacturing. Because with Abbott, it was the cotton swabs, I believe. And so where COVID was a big thing, they really had an expansion. They needed a lot of people really, really quickly to hit that demand. But now that demand has wavered, in the way that they're dealing with the economic environment, the potential recession that we're all potentially talking about, is by cutting the jobs. So when you're thinking about manufacturing, yes, it's a growing industry, but it's growing in very specific areas. So Maine's largest industries, these are the top industries in the state of Maine. So agricultural, fisheries, shipbuilding, that kind of all makes sense, right? We're right here on the coast of Maine. Healthcare, tourism, mining, manufacturing, and the fastest growing industry in our state is teaching. And by fastest growing, I mean the biggest need for what we're going to have. We have a teacher shortage. I'm sure you've heard about it. I just saw it on the news the other day about how we are going to deal with a teacher shortage. If you've ever worked in teaching, you know it's a unappreciated or underappreciated, I guess is the word I'm looking for, job here, because the pay is a little bit less. You're required to have a lot of skill in order to go into teaching, and it's a lot of background information. There's certain stipulations you have to meet in order to obviously work with children. So that's something that we will talk about a little bit more in depth later on, but just keep in the back of your mind that if you ever thought about teaching, now might be the time to look into getting that certification or those internships, or talking with your college about how you might be able to contribute, because we are in desperate need of more teachers. So the problems, this is like oversimplifying this way more than I probably should, but this is really what it gets down to, is we don't have enough people in the state for the amount of jobs we have currently. We have a changing work environment where people aren't looking to work maybe a 40-hour job anymore per week. People are looking for more flexibility in their schedule. People are looking to work remote. There's all kinds of things that are happening in the work environment right now that's giving a changing perspective for individuals and what they look for in a career or a job, because sometimes it's not about a career anymore. Sometimes it really is about, I want a job that fits my lifestyle right now, and that's okay. There's not enough training. So we do have job growth in specific industries, but there's not enough people going into those industries with that specific training. So think about your linemen, think about your electricians, think about your plumbers. There's also a shortage in those industries, and those are very specialized skills. And if you've been listening to the state of Maine of all, they've offered that community college where they can kind of go in the next couple of years and get that free base education. And they're really trying to focus on the skills. They're really trying to focus on the things that aren't the 4-year traditional path that a lot of us were told that we needed to take several years ago. A bachelor's degree does not mean that you're going to start off with a $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 right out of college. I think a lot of people, I know when I was in college, that was a surprise to me, that after having education, that it wasn't all that mattered. And I think a lot of people have taken those experiences and have decided that I don't need a 4-year degree, or I don't want to do a 4-year degree. I want to do something with my hands. I want to be in carpentry. I want to be in a more hands-on environment. And you can still make a decent amount of money in those industries. And then there's turnover and burnout. So not only is it hard to find employees, and it's hard to get the right training for employees, once you have them in there, because short staffing is still an issue in a lot of different industries, you're having them work harder, right? You have to meet the needs of your client base. And because you're having them work harder, that's leading to more burnout, which means that people aren't taking the time that they need for themselves. They're not getting that joy and that fulfillment that they need in order to continue going to work. And so they're just leaving. They're just leaving because at this point, employees really kind of have their pick of the litter. They have the opportunities out there. They know they're going to get another job somewhere else. And so how do we beat that? How do we talk about burnout when we know that we have to work? How do we talk about turnover and have it not cost you more money? Because it is a statistic that turnover actually costs you more money in the long run than to actually provide the training to retain an employee. So now what? You've really got two different things that we're focusing in this webinar today. So there's retain your current employees, and then there's actively recruiting your new employees. So retaining your current employees has to do with, number one, and it's the last thing on my list, but it really should be the first thing, is being available. If you're a manager, if you're an owner, and you don't spend time on a weekly or bi-weekly basis checking in one-on-one with your employees, and by checking in, I don't mean saying hi as you wave onto them as you go into your office to do paperwork for 12 hours. I mean, have you sat down with them and had a 15 to 30-minute conversation about how is their day going? How are they liking the work environment? How is the team going? You know, because there's a lot of those societal issues that you can address, like the nitpickiness, or if there's employee issues that you can get right to the bottom of very easily if you're available and they feel like it's easy to talk to you. That's the number one way you can retain your employees. If you're a manager, be available, be willing to listen. Don't give them you have to do this. Give them options, give them solutions. People like agency. They like to have control over what they personally want to do. Encourage that for your employees. Traditional benefits, that's the common one people think of. It's not going to be possible for every single person to offer a traditional benefits package. It costs you as a small employer money to offer a 401k or paid time off or sick time, or maybe it's healthcare, maybe it's life insurance. It all depends on what you can offer. It's definitely worth looking into. I don't want you to sit there and think, I can't offer traditional benefits. What I want you to do is I want you to look at the traditional benefits and see what is the most cost-effective that you could offer. There are a ton of retirement plans that aren't 401ks that are actually really manageable. They're really not that expensive to initiate. If you're willing to look into them, like the simple IRAs, you can really do something different and still offer a traditional benefit for your employee. You can offer non-traditional benefits. So right now, the flexible, hybrid, or fixed schedule is a big conversation. There are certain people who want to work a 10-to-2 schedule. If you can make that float and they're going to be a reliable employee, I encourage you to look at making that available for your employee. If you've got somebody who needs to work from home once a week because of a childcare situation or something else that it's just really important for them to get that one work from home day, if you can manage it, do it. Employee meals. I've had a number of restaurants that I've spoken with recently, like just offering them the ability for them to have their lunch, to have their breakfast, to have their dinner on site and not have to pay for it is one less thing that stresses them out. It's one less thing that makes it seem like you don't care about your employees, because you do want to provide them that 30-minute required lunch if they're working an 8-hour day. You do want to make sure that they have the space to be able to get away from the work environment for a little bit. Everybody needs that little bit of space for sanity. Make sure that you're offering that solution to them if you can. I've also got people in construction that are doing transportation. So if you need labor and not everybody that you work with has a vehicle, offer them transportation. If you can get them from point A to point B, and that's one less thing they have to stress about, you're removing an obstacle for these people to enter the workforce, which means that you get more opportunity of more labor to hopefully get you to the staffing level that you're desiring. And then there's housing. So I've talked to a ton of campgrounds. I've talked to a ton of hotels because the other issue is it's not just a work issue, it's a living issue. If I'm out in a rural Maine, so I came from Machias, for example, there's not a ton of people moving into Washington County out of choice. But if you offer housing there, that's one less thing they have to be concerned about, and you can guarantee they're going to show up, right? That they're going to be right there. They have no reason not to show up. It's just another one of those non-traditional benefits. And if you're in the housing or tourism industry anyway, then you have the space. And then it's opportunities for training to grow. Believe it or not, there are people who don't want to stay stationary in the same job over and over again. We did that a lot in the banking world. There's a lot of turnover because nobody wants to be a teller forever. And I can't blame them because people want to be challenged. They want to learn something new. So what we did is we focused on providing them training in their current role. They still were a teller, but once a week, maybe they did account openings. Maybe once a week they did lending. You're giving them that opportunity that says, if you want to build a career here, if you want to learn how to be in management, if you want to learn to take on a different role within this industry, let's give you some training to see if it's something that you're actually going to enjoy doing. And then membership. So like if you're a gym, offer a gym membership to your clients or your employees, because honestly, that may be a benefit that they love to do. They love to come to the gym. So they want to not only work here, but they want to work out here and have it be done for free. Memberships for subscriptions. So say like Netflix or like a streaming source, can you provide them a membership in those ways? Memberships can be really flexible. It really just depends. If you have connections with like a ski resort, or if you're working at a ski resort, that's a great way to give a membership or a certain amount of tickets or something like that, because it encourages that work-life balance. It's so super important for retaining your employees. And then actively recruiting. So that's my favorite, because when I ask people, what are you doing right now? The most of the time I get is nothing. I'm posting it. I'm putting it on the websites. I'm paying a certain amount of money to have it on Indeed. If you're not talking to somebody about your job roles or what the environment is or what your culture is, reading a piece of paper doesn't do that for you. And honestly, my encouragement is using your existing network. And I don't just mean the people that you know. I mean the people that your parents know, the people that your kids know, the people that your aunts and uncles know, people that you've been friends with since high school. They may know some people that are in your local area that want to help. Or maybe their kids are now old enough that they actually want a summer job. So reach out and say, hey, it's not rude to be on Facebook or LinkedIn and say, I'm looking for staff. Does anybody know somebody who's looking for a job? Especially with summer coming right up and tourism, again, being a huge industry, people are going to need that staffing and they need it now, right? They don't need it 3, 4, 6 months from now. They need it right now. I encourage you to start this as soon as possible. Implement an employee referral program. This is actually one of the number one ways companies find employees is they encourage their employees to refer them. Your current employees are not going to refer anybody to you if they don't enjoy their job. So that's why that retaining employees is really, really important. If you've created that culture, that open environment, that communication that you need for them to feel safe, for you to feel like they're going to show up every day, then they're more likely to tell their friend, their family, their, individuals that they interact with every day, you need to come work for my company because this is why. You need to come work for my boss. You need to come meet my boss, right? That's what you really want. And the employee referral program could be as easy as $25, right? Give them $25 for every person that says they were referred here to you. It's very minimal on an expense, and it could get you all the staffing that you potentially need. And then revisit your expectations and job descriptions. So a lot of managers and a lot of owners don't look at their job descriptions year over year. They keep the same job description. Well, things have changed, my friend. There are more efficiencies now than ever. If you haven't revisited your job description, please do so. Look at it, really highlight the things that you need this new person to know in order to be able to do this job. And if they don't need to know anything and you can provide them all the training, make sure you tell them that. People are willing to take a chance if they feel like they're going to get training. They're not willing to take a chance if they're going to try a job they've never had any experience in and no one's going to give them any help. That's a very scary environment for anybody to walk into. Students. So I think there was just a news article about high school students. High school students is the new trend on how you fill in your jobs, right? You have to be really careful with high school students that are in school because there are certain limitations to how many hours they can work, right? I think it's 20 hours while they're in high school, or actually in the school year. And then I think after that, you're fine to work them in the summertime up to 40 hours. Students are ambitious. They're not going to be forever employees. You know that. They're looking for either a summer job, maybe they're looking for a couple of years before they graduate high school and they're going to go out to college. But take a look at your students. Don't degrade or don't offset them or not look at them because they're young. If you're looking for staff and you want to give your opportunities of training to them, they are more than willing to take you on. Another option is new Mainers. So, and this could be new Mainers, it could be immigrants, it could be anybody who's coming to the state that's from out of state. Those people are the most ambitious, the most hardworking people that I've ever worked with. I obviously work in Lewis and Auburn pretty frequently, so I deal with a ton of new Mainers, both business owners and individuals working for business owners. I will tell you that if you give them a chance and if you provide the training that the state of Maine has developed to help kind of bridge the gap for you, because there are barriers, there are cultural barriers, right? Like timing. Showing up on time is sometimes a cultural difference, right? There's a fluidity in some other cultures compared to the American way. New Mainers have different requirements as far as what their expectations are for when it comes to work. That, they're going to come and they're going to work really hard, but there might be language barriers. So don't be afraid to look at the options. There are a lot of trainings and a lot of opportunities that the state of Maine has created to help integrate new Mainers into Maine's current society. And they really want to be here as far as the ones that I've interacted with. Last but not least, you're going to use your available resources. You are about to get a ton of information from me that has links to many, many, many different resources, whether it's the Maine Department of Labor, whether it's the U.S. Department of Labor, or it's maybe more local than that, it's your local town or chamber. You're going to have a lot of different things from me that's going to give you opportunity to say, I had no idea that training existed. I had no idea the state would help pay for an employee of mine. I had no idea there was an internship program where if I'm a plumber, that I can actually have the state of Maine pay for the salary of my intern, and I get somebody who can help me with all that stuff. There's going to be some great stuff in here for you to use whenever you are ready to look at the available resources. You don't have to do it alone. You do not have to do any of this alone. So first and foremost, the Maine Department of Labor, it's a fantastic place to start. They've actually developed a lot of career centers. Actually, my brother-in-law is now just employed at a career center. So I spoke with him a little bit about what that looks like. And so the state of Maine is having individuals actually work with you. So if you come to the career center and I say, I'm looking for a job, but I have no idea what industry I want to work in. They talk to you about your skills. They talk to you about what you've worked in previously. They talk about what you want to work in, right? And then they have certain employers who are already signed up for the Maine Department of Labor who are looking for workers. And essentially it's a match program, right? So they're going to match the right individual for you. Think about how great that would be if the career center person calls you up and says, I have a great person for you. This is what we want to do. And all you have to do is say, yeah, send them on over. I'd love to interview them, right? Half the work is done. They found somebody who's actually interested. The second part is you reeling them in and showing them that this is the place they want to work, right? Job fairs. Always be aware of the job fairs. You don't have to have a table at them, but just going in there and seeing what other people are looking for, right? Being there, having a business card, being willing to talk to the people who show up to those work fairs, you have no idea what they're looking for, and a lot of them don't either. So if you can be ready to just have a conversation, hey, I'm doing this currently, and I think you might be great. They don't have to work in the same environment. If you're in customer service, that can go anywhere. That can be in retail, that can be in restaurant, that can be in construction, it can be in banking. It's so relatable, but so is construction labor, right? So if you've been in construction your whole life and that feels like the only thing you can do, people really want somebody who knows how to do construction or carpentry. They want that experience, and they're willing to take your hard work and all that you've done and either retrain you or use those current skills in manufacturing. Or maybe you're in boating, right? And you're doing ship repair. These things aren't super duper separate from each other. You can definitely use your same skills to fit into a different industry. There's also tax programs. Like the state of Maine actually is giving you, or sorry, I think it's a federal tax program where they're actually going to pay for you to hire specific workers from targeted groups. And by targeted groups, that could mean low to moderate income. It could be rural demographics. It could be LGBTQ people. It could be new Mainers and immigrants. It could be BIPOC people. There's a lot of opportunity here to help connect you with people in those demographics that also makes us a more diverse and equitable state, which we all know is really, really super important. And there's also information about recruiting and retaining individuals with disabilities. There's that big faux pas, right? That someone with a disability doesn't want to be in the work environment. That's 100% not true. There are some people who can't because of their disability. And there are some people who have to have a modified work in order to accommodate some of their disability. Look at them and talk to them realistically about what that would look like for them. Give them real expectations about what the job would entail and what you're capable of providing for them to make it easier or to accommodate the disability they have. And then there's some other things that we're going to talk about in regards to people who are looking to re-enter. So people that's re-entering, whether it's from addiction or re-entering because of a prison stint. These people typically are looked at as people who can't get jobs or people who don't want them working for you, right? I will tell you there's a ton of restaurants who have been very successful in staffing their restaurants by going through the Maine Department of Corrections and doing a work release program. They've been very successful in getting their staffing, and they've been some really good employees. No matter what employee you have, you always have the risk of them not showing up. Don't assume because of past scenarios and situations that that's what's going to happen if you hire somebody who's going into a reentry program. So this is a little bit more information about each specific subset of group that I was talking about. These are the links for connecting with new Mainers. The new Mainer community is a large group of people that is more willing to work than a lot of the other population base that I've dealt with. And by saying willing to work, I mean they're willing to give you 1 hour, 2 hours, 10 hours a day. You just tell them what you need, and they're happy to be there. You do have to work through the language barriers, the cultural norms, and what the additional requirements are when you're hiring these types of people. If you want help, if this is a scary subject, but you're more than willing to look into it, contact one of us at the SBDC. We don't necessarily know every single piece of this, but we're willing to contact the state. We're willing to work with you to figure it out, right? So we're going to talk to you about what documents you do need to have, what kind of training programs that you can apply to that's going to help the salary of this type of position. Let's just talk about it. It's a great resource for us. And there was a recent census data that of the people that moved to the state in this past year, 10% of them actually came from a different country. So it is a huge market of 10% of that population that moved here last year that are going to be looking for some type of work in the next 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever their work-life balance situation looks like. Hiring foreign workers. So there's a couple different things about hiring foreign workers. It also depends on the industry that you're in, right? So there's different requirements if you're in agriculture. If you're in farming, you probably are a little bit more familiar with this. And I super encourage anybody who's had familiarity in hiring foreign workers to explain that process to other people, especially other people in business with you, right? Like they get it. They need to have somebody who's in business who understands their perspective, who can say, yeah, I've gone through this program. I've done this paperwork. It really wasn't that hard. And now I have all the laborers I need to pick the apples off of my farm, you know, or maybe it's the restaurant industry, or maybe it's manufacturing, or it could be literally anything. Have somebody who's done this before help you through these programs. And then going back to the employing people in recovery and reentry. So different ways of hiring these people. You can be part of the work release program. You could also be somebody who's looking to hire these individuals proactively by just reaching out about when they're going to be released, right? And a lot of businesses and a lot of people that are interested in staffing are more open to this idea. It obviously depends on the type of industry that you're in. You know, going back to teaching and going back to banking, they have background checks, right? And there's certain requirements that might not fit for somebody in this particular part of their life, right? But it all depends on the industry that you're looking at, and it's definitely worth taking a look at what options are available. And if it's something that's going to be easily fit for you, especially if you're close to one of the prisons, right? Because it's going to be way easier to work that out if it's in the work release program than if they have to try to find housing and a bunch of other things to go with it if you're somewhere rurally all the way across the state. And then lastly, there's training and education. So it's not just about hiring people, right? It's about training and educating them, because one of the things I mentioned earlier was it's not necessarily that it's just a people shortage, it's a training shortage. So how do we get people the right training? Well, there is a initiative called Put Maine to Work initiative, which actually is going to help you kind of make a path for what kind of training a new employee might need. Talks about the apprenticeship program that I mentioned and how that might work, how you might recruit people, how you're going to post jobs, how do you increase employee engagement. So really a little bit more in depth from what we're talking about today, but completely necessary avenue is to look at the training and education, because sometimes it's a certificate, right? So maybe they can come in and they can help do the labor, and in 3 months after they've done their certificate program, they actually can help you with the electrician work, or they can help you with the plumbing. And think about what that does for your employee to come in and be provided a training that's actually going to help them in their whole life, because they take that training with them. They're going to take that and do other bigger, greater things, hopefully within the state of Maine, and contributing back to the communities. This is a ton of websites that are literally here for workplace development, right? So this is the place that you're going to go to click on some links to figure out what's going to best suit you. Every single one of these is here to develop workforce. So you must call them, you have to talk to them and see, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm willing to provide. What solutions can you provide for me? Or what options do I have available for providing training? Like, staffing is an issue, right? So if you're going to send somebody away for a program for a week, that means you need to have sufficient staffing to get through that week. But talk it out with one of these resources who really know how that's going to benefit you in the long run. If you invest in your employees, they're much more likely to stay. And now we're entering kind of the end of our webinar. So there's my direct contact information. So that's if you want to schedule a one-on-one with me. We, of course, have a whole team of SBDC advisors, as Kelsey mentioned, and I love to put this photo up because we are all smiling and happy. We are always that way, but these are some of my partners and other business advisors all throughout the state. And any one of us would be happy to help you on your journey, no matter where you happen to be. And if you just don't know, you're scared about making that first step, if you still sit here and go, I have no idea what I'm doing, I really encourage you to meet with somebody, right? Just talk it out. That's all I'm asking you to do. Take one step to ask for the help that you need to know how to move forward in your business. That's literally what the SBDC is here for. So thank you guys for showing up today and listening to my webinar. I really appreciate it. And if you need anything at all, just don't hesitate to reach out.